This is Duke University.
Good evening, and thanks for coming here. Dr. Damon Tweedy's book is coming out at a very interesting time for our nation and for our university, where the issue of race, with everything that it brings forth in terms of pain and personal reflection and organizational reflection, it just provides an opportunity for us to continue to think deeply about the issue of race. Damon has, as many of you know, has been going across the country talking about his book, which is a deeply personal book, but also an analytic book in terms of the issue of race in medicine. And so as he's been to hospitals and universities, and most recently Google, it really is so gratifying for him to be home for this very special conversation. I do want to mention that this is being recorded, and so this will be available on YouTube after the conversation, and that the book, which I know you'll all want to purchase, if you haven't already purchased, will be available in the Gothic bookstore. So I'm really pleased to welcome Damon and our own President Brodhead for a very special conversation.
Well, thanks for coming. I have, while I've been president, developed a skill I did not know I had. You can decide whether it's a skill. Maybe I should only just say I've developed a practice I didn't used to practice, which is interviewing people. And so when Bob Lefkowitz won the Nobel Prize, I interviewed him. When David Cutcliffe became a winning coach, I interviewed him. And last spring, I had the idea of some other person I could interview because a total stranger made an appointment to come to my office to give me a book. And what you said to me was that that the book was partly about your training in medicine at Duke Medical School, and that not everything you said was flattering, and that you wanted to give it to me. And I said to you, you wanted to give the book to me. And I said to you that I would not have expected or required that everything you said would be flattering. I would be interested if it were truthful. And then we began a conversation that went in many, many directions. And then we parted. You gave me the book. I took it home. I have since read it and discovered another whole version of you the writer. And now, between then and now, you've had a new life open up for you, which is being interviewed. And so, well, you wrote a book that it's on the New York Times bestseller list. You've been going around places. And of course, you can imagine that for any of 1,000 reasons, lots of people are going to want to be interested in your book and wanting to be interested in the author. If you're willing, I'm going to ask some questions of a sort that anyone interested in this book might ask. And after that, we'll throw it open to some questions from this crowd, only observing a certain time limit. But that's OK. I mean, there'll be plenty of time. Let me start this way. My eyes fall on students in the audience. I think one thing that's very hard when you're a student in a university is you have no idea what you're going to be. And you see all these people who are very successful things, and you think, well, they always were going to be that, and they must have always known it, right? And let's use you as a prime example. Because certainly I could tell the story of your life in such a way that it is a biography of unrelenting success. Right? You went to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which is famous for the Meyerhoff program, the scholarship that has produced an extraordinarily disproportionate share of the black students who have gone on to careers in the physical sciences and biomedicine. You were offered, this is so annoying, you were offered your choice of an athletic or an academic scholarship. I mean, you know, really. From there, you went to Duke, got your medical degree, From there, you went to law school. You went to Yale Law School. I still don't understand that chapter. Then you came back here to a medical career, and you are now a faculty member on the faculty, the medical faculty in the Department of Psychiatry at Duke. So you are a really successful person, a really successful doctor. But let me ask you, take us back some. How did you come to think of yourself as a doctor? What was the path that led to the beginning of something that in retrospect seems like such a clear path to us?
Yeah, so like you say, when you hear people describe my resume before speeches, it always seems kind of weird because it's like that sounds like another person. It doesn't sound like me. And when I think back to myself, as a young person, being 10, 12 years old, I could never imagine being in this position where I'm at now. Often you hear people who are successful, and it seems like they're destined to be in this position. And nothing could be further from the truth when I think about myself. I didn't grow up in the worst area, but it certainly was a pretty gritty area right outside the Washington, D.C. area. I'm thinking now, there was a person right across the street from me who went to prison for armed robbery and then got murdered in prison. A person next door who did a lot of time for drug-related charges. And there were several people like that on my block. And that was sort of the kind of environment where I grew up. And so the people who were successful, particularly the men, it was only through sports. And so I did play sports, and I think that was like the only way to sort of channel success. And so that was kind of the environment that I had. So thinking that I would be here as a physician as a 12-year-old would have just been inconceivable.
So how did it happen then? How did you make the switch?
Well, I think, so here's the role with teachers. So when I was, I went to a public middle school, very sort of unremarkable, probably 98% black, really not a good, a lot of kids that really struggled, didn't do well. I had one day in 8th grade, a teacher said, you're good in math, why don't you take this exam for this magnet program? And at first I didn't think that was something that I could do, it was kind of bristled at the idea. But then I talked over with my mom when I got home, and she said, yeah, you should try it. And I did, and I got into this program. And then when this program was situated within a predominantly African-American school, but the magnet program was very different. It was like 95% white and Asian. So I got exposed to a completely different world from what I had previously experienced. And it was there that I was around students, and I first got the idea of, well, I'm good in science and math, and this is a certain appeal to this. Maybe I can, become a. It wasn't even about being a doctor. Maybe I could go to college. That was sort of the step that I was at that point. So that's kind of what it was. And then I got to college, I got to did an internship with a young African-American cardiologist who was affiliated with the NIH. And that was the first time I really seen like a black doctor. And I was like, wow, maybe this is something that I could do. Okay. And then that was really where it all crystallized from there. So you didn't begin by saying, from the day I was born, I wanted to care for sick people or something. It's a very different story than one you just laid out, right? Yeah, I really just, seeing a black doctor, I don't think I'd ever seen anyone, in real life until I was, 18 years old or something. So the idea was, it was really inconceivable for me at that point. So no, I wasn't didn't come from the womb thinking I was going to, be a doctor now. Kind of fell into it. You found your way. The idea came clear through various chapters of experience. Yeah, what I would say is that actually science, I said I was good in science and math. In some ways it appealed to me because it was like this, it seemed to me as if it was objective. It was, you're memorizing formulas, equations. Right. It was a kind of an escape from sort of, so much of your life is messy with race, you're a young black person, so much life is messy, and this was like really objective and concrete, and I could do this and I could kind of escape that other sort of world in a way. So that's sort of how medicine and science really appealed to me. So that's where it really came in. Okay. And then you applied to medical schools, and I'm going to guess you got into every one you applied to. I certainly know you had the chance to go to Johns Hopkins. And you chose to come to the one university, the top medical school in a formerly segregated state. Not that there aren't racial issues in many other cities that have famous medical centers. Tell us a little bit about that choice. Yeah, so I interviewed sort of many of the medical schools along the East Coast. Johns Hopkins and Duke were the two that I really was most interested in, but I certainly interviewed schools in the Northeast as well, many of those. And when you go, there's very few African American students that are sort of applying and are in this sort of little network. And so you sort of see the same students at every school that you would go to. And it's kind of an unfortunate kind of reality, but what they would say is like, Duke, it seems it's great in the winter, but why in the world would you want to go there? They don't have a good track record for people like us, and that's sort of how I talk about it in the book, because that was sort of the kind of the little buzz that you would hear, the little murmurs that you would hear about. But when I came to Duke, I met Brenda Armstrong, and I was like, this doesn't seem like what I was hearing about. And so that was a huge factor, meeting her and then sort of taking me around and that sort of thing.
Well, I know it's just factually true that Duke has the highest proportion of underrepresented minorities in its medical class of any top medical school. Was that already true at the time you came
No,
here?
it was not. So this is
See,
actually...
I'm betting it wasn't. I'm positive it wasn't.
She was actually in her first year at that point.
Oh, okay.
So this is her first year as dean. So so she was really taking the lead. And if those who don't know Brenda Armstrong, she was a former Duke undergrad back in the early 60s. You mostly probably know her, but she was very, very, it was her life mission to really recruit African-American students to Duke. And so, so before, my wife's in the class before me at Duke at medical school, and there were actually very few African Americans in that class. So my class was sort of like that first class where this transition from like the way things had been to the way things have sort of evolved into. And Brenda Armstrong certainly was the lead person in that.
And I'm not going to conceal from these people that in your first year you had an experience that you described, and no doubt it was the one you wanted me to hear about from you before I read about it in your book. Do you want to tell her, or do I want to tell her?
Sure, I'll tell. Yeah, I got to say just an aside. So I actually lost. At first, I thought this book was going to have a pretty small audience, a pretty narrow audience.
Hey, you're stealing my copy.
Hey, I'm taking myself back to that day when I met you.
Yeah.
And so it got so in March the publisher told me that it got selected for this sort of buzz panel for books, and it was going to be this big event in New York City in the end of May, and this is where all these sort of media types people were going to be here. And once I realized that, I was like, well, this is going to be a little bit more than I had bargained for. I need to start making sure this is going to work out. And so that's what led me to. First, I talked with Dr. Andrew. Well, no, I
must think I'm a very tender person.
I lost a few nights of sleep. I just put it that way. So I met with Dr. Andrews, the dean of the medical school first. And then Keith Brodhead is a former president of Duke, and he's also in my field of psychiatry. And he sort of greased the wheels to sort of, get me in your direction.
I would have read it whether you had come or not, but I found it very interesting. But you're not answering my question.
Oh, that's right.
As they say during the Republican debates.
Yeah, I was watching those debates last night. Yeah, so I've been working on that skill, right? Yeah. So I was trying to give you guys a little context. But, so that first year of medical school, so this is about a month into the year. And so at this point, I told you my background, so I'm pretty insecure coming to a place like Duke. My parents, my dad didn't finish high school. I come from a great family, but just didn't have much in the way of formal education. Mom had grown up in sort of segregated schools in the district, and that was sort of my environment. My older brother's the only person in my family who had gone to college and graduated from college, so he was a huge role model for me. So that's the background I came into when I came to Duke. And I'm meeting people, and they're saying, oh yeah, my dad's the chairman of orthopedic surgery, and my dad's a radiologist, my mom is this. And so I was just like, wow, how am I going to...
What am I?
Yeah, how am I going to fit in with all these folks? And I've gone to Harvard, I've gone to Yale, and that was sort of this environment that I was really feeling like I wasn't sure if I was going to work, I was going to make it here. And that was sort of the mindset. So I studied a lot, and then, I was feeling better because I did pretty well on the first set of tests. I said, okay, this is going to work out. And then one day I come into the classroom. It's about a month into the semester, and this is when Duke was still it was an old classroom, an old lecture hall. So we went out for a break, came back into for the second part of the lecture, and the professor comes in and makes a beeline for me. He sort of sees me come into the room and walks all the way across and confronts me, and he's like, he points up to the lights and says, are you here to fix the lights? And I said, my first reaction was actually, what did I do something wrong? Like, did I not dress the right way? Did I not shave today? Like, I sort of internalized, like maybe I had done something to make him think to come at me in that sort of way. And then he was pretty irritated, and he sort of continued the exchange. He's like, I called about this last week. Why haven't you done your job, basically? And so, I was already really kind of fragile ground about how I was going to make it here. And so that really kind of just was it was a blow in a way. Because I'm thinking, why else could he have thought about this? And so in the book, I talk about maybe it's this, maybe that. I try and go through all the mental gymnastics of what it could have been. And then then even if this is what he said, what do I do about it? How do I tell someone? Are they going to understand this? Are they going to think that I'm, militant and thinking everything's racial? And so you go through all these sort of gymnastics, and it kind of sucked, And so that was sort of the framework that I dealt with right there.
Anybody hearing it, I mean, if you live in the world, you've heard stories like this a lot in your life. Every one of them unbelievable, every one of them totally regrettable, and you just feel the injury that was abstract is now visited in a completely personal form, right? That if you're black, you must be part of the custodial staff.
Right. But the thing is, I mean, I've had much worse experiences than that. But there was, because I've had people. I mean, I've gone to a store. I've gone to like a Dunkin' Donuts one time, and
Right.
when I walked in, I'd come from a gym, and the clerk was just shaky. And then once I got there, he said, "Well, he had this big sigh of relief once I pulled up my wallet. He said, "Man, I really thought you were going to rob me." And then, so I've had all kinds of experiences like that. I mean, being a tall, dark man as a young person. This was different in the sense that this was like, it wasn't like a random encounter with a stranger who you're never going to see again, and you can just kind of move on from it. This is the professor who kind of has grades. He's going to control your next step in the process. So I felt like he had a lot of power over me in a way that other people that I randomly meet in the store wouldn't.
Well,
and so it was a different kind of injury in that way.
And then we spend a lot of time thinking about first-generation people and people who come here without the self-confidence that's handed to people whose parents went to college. And obviously this and that, the racial part of it and the first-generation part, aggravating each other. Tell us what you did about it.
Yeah, so there were a lot of, should I do this, should I do that? I mean, I thought about trying to explain it to him, and then I thought he's not going to get it, and he maybe just going to get more upset and sort of use this against me. And so I said, well, maybe I can try and talk to someone above him. But then I thought they're not going to understand, where I'm coming from. I talked to a couple classmates, and we tried to make light of it. We tried to say this is like, it sucks, but this is like, we tried to make jokes about it, and that was sort of our way of coping with it. But for me, the only way that I could sort of prove that I belong was to just excel. And so I would literally hold myself up in my room for about the next month. Basically didn't come out. I mean, I'd go to class, go straight home, just study almost really all night. I mean, I never sort of worked that hard in my life, and I would sleep a couple hours every night. And I ended up getting like the second highest grade in the entire class on the final exam out of 100 students. And so at the end of that day, at the end of the semester, I came up to him because I wanted to know if it was a part of me that probably just wanted to just kind of stick it to him, There's certainly a part of you that wanted to do that, but then there's also a part that really wanted to know if I had gotten like the honors, which was like the top 10 students in the class sort of thing. So we had this exchange at the end. And in this exchange, I come up to him and he looks at me funny. Like I think he must have remembered that we had this exchange, the way he looked at me. He was sort of awkward. He kind of was like, taken aback that I was there. And then, I asked the question, I showed him my exam score. Did I get the honors? And it was another strange reaction. So he never acknowledged what happened before, but he looked at me, and then he looked at the paper, then he looked at my ID badge, and kind of went back and forth to try and see if this was like one and the same person. Like, are you the person who did this kind of thing? And then it was like a complete switch. It was like a light bulb went off. He's like, wow, you really must be amazing if you could do this, and can you work with me now? And then there was like no kind of acknowledgement of what had taken place. So it was a really kind of it was a mixture of, you feel good in some ways that but then there's another party that feels like, it just wasn't, there's a certain bad feeling that kind of goes with it. So it's like it's a mixed feeling that I felt in that particular incident. So that sort of laid the framework for me.
Something I found very striking in the book is you tell the story with very vivid, fresh recall, but you don't give any clues as to who this person is. Right? Okay. So, and I'm not going to ask you today. I mean, obviously, you chose that decorum in the book.
Right.
Okay. So now I want to ask you a question that occurred to me afterward, which is, if such a thing happened now, hey, Brenda, you already missed the part where you got talked about.
I know. I gave you a whole bunch of.
If you've now had, how many trainees have you?
Oh gosh, I can't even. You mean people who work underneath? Oh, I can't even.
How many medical students have you been? I mean, what, 50, 100?
Well, so yeah, it's hard to even. I mean, so I would say that they're about. There's a course I did, a practice course, where I would have like 10 medical students under my tutelage and you'd follow them really closely, weekly for a couple of years. But as far as students that come in, I mean, they're rotating all the time. They basically rotate every couple months. You get basically a new student, a new resident.
But the real reason I want to ask, what I want to ask you is, if such a thing happened to a student you had when you were their teacher, what would you tell them?
If a student came up to me and told me
that such a thing had happened, I mean, it's actually not an unlikely.
Yeah, years later, actually, it's funny that Brenda, Dr. Armstrong's here, because I talked to her about the incident, and what she actually told me was that that she understood and she wasn't totally shocked, and that she shared an experience she had from her own days that was in some ways even more horrifying, and so in some ways there's a certain way in which that makes you feel like you're not alone, because sometimes when these things happen, you feel like, so there's a certain feeling of that. Now, I would take it a step further. I mean, I wouldn't just. I would first want to let the student know that, acknowledge what they're feeling and go from there. But I did be a step further. I would probably want to know, who was the person who did this. I'd want to, you know, have
And how
some,
could you get a word back to them somehow? I mean, if only so that somebody would sit down with them. You know, I mean, when I was a department chair, you used to have things like this happen, and you'd have a faculty member come and sit down, and you'd talk to them about what had happened, and you know, sometimes such things have an educational role. I had another thought, which is, okay, so in a way, your response to this very stressful and, let's be frank, humiliating event was to overachieve, right? Living well, doing well is the best revenge. Did you have, the book makes it sound quite lonely. Did you have help, you shared it with your friends. Did you have mentors in, well, you mentioned Brenda. Did you have a community of people who gave you support and helped you? You know, you achieved extraordinary success in a circumstance that was very challenging.
Yeah, at that moment, it was much more of a lonely, kind of isolating, you know, experience. I think only years later did I even tell my parents about it, because I was worried that, you know, if they're, you know, they put a lot of hope and investment into me coming here, and I didn't want them to worry and think about that I may be struggling. Only years later, and they said they wish they would have known and all these sorts of things. But so it was a very much a sort of like I just did it on my own kind of thing. And I know there's cost to that. I know that may not have been the best way for everyone to do it, but that's sort of the way that I cope with it.
Well, I mean, you tell it as experience. You don't tell it for right or wrong. I'll skip ahead to ask you a question. All this time later, you went to Duke Medical School. After Duke Medical School, you stayed here for your residence, right? And now you're on the faculty here, right? All these years later, you're at the very place where that happened. How does that happen? What's the meaning of your?
Well, there's a certain symmetry. There's a certain sort of, you know, poetic justice is not the right word, because you're an English, so I can't use these. I got to make sure I use my terms correctly here. I'm going to get myself in trouble.
Don't worry, I'll correct you as needed.
Yeah, I got to be careful here with the audience. No, I mean, there's a certain sort of, it feels, it's like you're coming full circle in a way, and you know, you started in this place, and now you're in the position where you can sort of, you know, change things that have happened.
That's right.
Yeah, so it feels really gratifying in that way.
That's right. Yeah. Let's start talking about when you start practicing with patients or on patients. It's a medical memoir. That's part of what's so interesting about it is that the encounter of taking care of people is very humanized in your account of it. People have names, their stories, they have biographies. So it's not the abstract version of medicine where the doctor comes in, objectifies somebody as the facts of their disease, right? I mean, that's very different from
which is all too often what happens in the medical, you know, training process. But
I found it interesting that one of the things you say about your medical training is that you were taught to honor patients. You were taught that it was an honor. This is a quote from your book. That you were taught that to have the position of physical care of somebody is a position of privilege and responsibility.
Yeah, you get a lot of mixed signals when you're training. So this was during the earlier period, and this is that period when you're sort of like a doctor-patient class.
Right.
And so these are doctors who are much more sort of inclined to really impart those sorts of values on the students, and that's sort of the course that I teach now. And so yeah, there was a professor there who said it was an honor and privilege. You know, people sort of complain about all the bad things with being a doctor, all the stress and all these things, but it's really an honor to be able to be with someone in this situation of struggle and to be able to make a difference in their life. So that's the message that I was trying to convey, but there's so many other messages in the process of training which sort of undermine that, in which you're sort of taught to sort of see people as, you know, body parts and organ systems and
test results. And,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's this constant tension that you struggle with.
But that's not a lesson you learned very well in the evidence of the book. I'm just saying, the relation of a doctor to a patient is a very human relation in this book.
Absolutely.
So when you start seeing patients, then there's another dimension of race and medicine, because then you start, of course, encountering what everybody knows in some abstract way, which is that there are health burdens that are correlated by race in our country. You talk about hypertension, you talk about diabetes, things of this sort, things that are more likely. What's the line you have? Probably the most quotable line in Europe. Being black is bad for your health.
Being black can be bad for your health.
Can be bad for your health. Yeah. Okay. So, and partly, I guess I'm just interested, you've written all the stories, and I remember them all, how you think about how that problem arises and what your role as a doctor was when you're dealing with humans who are the object of of disparate, right, unequal health results.
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. So, you know, there's a part of you that, I mean, some of I must have known that before I came to medical school, but I try and think back to that period of time. But I grew up in such a community where you kind of separate it off, and you don't really think about it's an all-black community,
Right.
you are in a family, and you don't think about the differences in the way that I certainly must have known it on some level, but when you get there into medical school, it's like what really first happens is that as a first-year student, they teach you about all these diseases, and so they say over and over again, well, this disease is more common in black people, and that black people do worse. And it's like this, it was a refrain, and it was over and over again. And so, for many other students, I always wonder, like, what are people thinking about this? Like, I'm sitting around the room looking at other people and thinking, what are they thinking? Are they thinking it's just, is it genetics? Is it just lifestyle? Or do they not just care? Are they just trying to memorize this for an exam and they don't care about any of it at all? But for me, it had all these sort of real personal meanings because,
Right, of course.
Because for me, that first year, my grandmother died about 6 weeks into medical school. She'd taken a real sharp turn for the worse in terms of her health. In my last year of college, she'd had high blood pressure for a long time. Then she had a couple strokes and wound up having sort of really bad dementia, and then just had a really quick decline. And so these things they were teaching about had a personal meaning. And then a few months later, in that first year of medical school, we were practicing learning how to check blood pressure and draw blood on each other and all these sorts of things, learn how to basic doctor stuff. And a classmate checks on blood pressure, and it's really high. And I was like, whoa, And so at this point in my life, I joke that I was 20 years ago. I had a good hairline, normal hairline. I had a normal waistline. So I feel like I was in really good shape, top of the world kind of thing. And then someone's telling me my blood pressure is really high. 150 for the doctor's room, like 150 over 90. It was, yikes. And then they kept checking it. And then a few weeks later, I went to a family doctor on campus on student health, and it was even higher. And they did some blood tests and urine tests, and it was like, well, you might have some kidney problems as well as this blood pressure. So it was this really big blow. So what I was learning about in the textbook had a real personal meaning to me.
Of course.
And so really I was trying to figure out, and then as you get into the clinical ward, well, let me take a step back. So it had its personal meaning to me, but the question was, you had all this information, but the question was, why? Like, why was this the case? And then what could we do about it? And those are the questions that I feel like the professors never answered. It was only like, you had this data, but there was no answers to why we were dealing with this problem. And then I was starting to experience it on a personal level. Okay. And so then as I got onto the wards and started seeing patients, that's when I started to really get a sense of what all the factors that kind of went into it. And so the book in a large part is like a journey of self-discovery, to discovering kind of the issues that happen within me, but also within the larger black community as to why these health problems are existing. So it's kind of this journey of sort of self-discovery.
So when you were taught, people didn't ask the question why, but now you ask the question why, and how do you answer it?
Yeah, one time
I mean, I've read the book, so I actually know how you answer it.
Yeah.
I mean,
so one time I did ask a professor, because I was really distressed this one day. This is after I'd I realized my blood pressure was high, and they were talking about it, and I was like, well, what is this all about, kind of thing. And I guess I was just really feeling kind of desperate that day. And I think she could sense that I wasn't, it was bothering me on a personal level, but she couldn't really offer anything. She said, it's just the way it is. And she just she couldn't, either she didn't know more, she couldn't say more. So that really was kind of disheartening in its own way as well. So when I got out there into the real world, you start to see people, and there's all kinds of factors at work, right? So and I talk about these in the book. And so what I do is I'll use a case of a person, and I'll use their story to explain these larger problems and why these larger problems are existing. So I try and connect the human with the sort of broader context. And so one obvious issue is that people are, just the practical issues of poverty, real practical stuff. Like second year medical school, you go out to this rural clinic about 90 minutes from campus. The people there, it's like a town that's all black and white, kind of like in the old ways, 50% black, 50% white. But you go to this clinic and everybody there is black, because no one has health insurance. So it's like where all the really poor people go. They don't have health insurance. It's pretty clear once you get there that the kind of problems you could treat at Duke, you can't treat there in the same way. You can't get medications, you can't get lab tests. And so you can just see this sort of different level of care that people are experiencing. But then you also see the kind of environment they're living in, and sort of the poverty and the way that impacts so many things. So I think there's like issues at the system level, issues in terms of like having health insurance, having access to doctors, medical care, real basic kind of stuff that we're talking about. And that's no question, that's a huge part of the picture. But then there's these issues between like the patient and the doctor, and I talk a lot about that in the book, like the idea of sort of are patients and doctors sort of on the same page. And we see a lot of times where African American patients would not feel like the doctors they were seeing, who were primarily white, understood them or had their best interests at heart. And so there would be routine sort of treatments that they would bristle at. and you had to sort of try and convince them that this is, because there's this huge bad history, right? You know, and so,
of course.
Right, there's a history of black people being experimented upon, being on segregated wards, and there's all this kind of mistrust that you experience.
Of course.
And so all that still plays out in many people's reality now. So that's another huge factor that I would see. And then there are cases where I would see this, and I talk about this in the book, where doctors themselves would sort of come at African patients, weren't really understanding them, and were kind of minimizing their issues. And so all these factors are things that are at work. So I really kind of explore all these in the book.
Well, as part of what's interesting in the book is that you don't choose one mode of explanation. I mean, you give each of them its full weight, but you put other ones together with them. I mean, it's quite interesting as the book unfolds. And I think that over time this will be regarded as one of the important things that you do. But certainly one of the points that your book makes quite unforgettably is if you have a society with lots of socioeconomic inequality in it, and if race correlates with poverty in a high level, then the things that correlate with poverty are also going to have a larger dimension of race. And so a very prominent thing you talk about is the quality of health care you get if you're on public assistance and the quality of health care you get if you have a private health plan. You and I both have a private health plan, right? Yes. But you have worked in contexts where people don't, where the whole point is there's no doctor all weekend, right? And just all the differences.
Yeah. So one clear example where that often happens is that people who have public plans or uninsured, which are still a lot of people who don't have health insurance.
Right.
They'll go to a doctor or a setting like that clinic I worked at where I described.
Sure.
It's like you have a doctor, you have students, and we're volunteers. We rotate there. The next month there's someone else there, and there's someone else, and then you never get to see the same person. So as a patient, I mean, you're not having a chance to get any kind of connection with someone. And if you're only time you're seeing doctors is in these kind of settings or in emergency room settings, you're meeting people in this kind of quick setting. Everyone's rushed. This is where bias in these judges sort of
stressed. And also, if the fact that people don't have a continuing relationship means that there's no possibility to get beyond the initial biases.
Exactly. So that's a huge
So
issue.
let me talk about bias and patient treatment, because it's also fairly unforgettable when you are called to deal with a patient who doesn't want a doctor of your race.
Yeah. So I explore from all different angles. So there's the black doctor, black patient, black doctor, white patient, white doctor, black patient. So I explore from all these different angles because they all have their own nuance to them. And so I think the one example you're referring to, you really did read the book. Okay. All right. So
I wouldn't have thought you would have.
I'm impressed. Things always happen like when you're in your first year. So this was like my first year as a doctor. So this is another huge transition period. You go from being a medical student to being an intern or a doctor when you really have responsibility for patients. You have an MD behind your name. It says MD, but you don't feel like an MD in any way at all. You're still really just trying to learn the ropes. Doctors in the audience know what I'm talking about. And so this is like about a month into the year, and I'm in the general medicine ward, and we get a call. We come down to the emergency room, and before we go in, so it's me. I'm the African American doctor. There's a woman. She's the resident. She's above me. She's the supervisor. She's a Jewish woman. And then we go down. The nurse says, "Watch out for this guy that you're about to see." And then we're like, "Well, why?" And then, I can't say the word that he said, but basically he said that he didn't want a black doctor to treat him.
But it's not the word he used.
He used the N-word to say that. Because when he got to the emergency room, there were a lot of black people who were like nurses' aides, and so I guess he just was disoriented. He saw all these people that he wasn't getting what he expected. He came to the hospital and saw all these African American staff there, and then he said, and then he's thinking, well, the last thing I want is a African American doctor, and he said, I don't want one. And he used the N-word to describe it, and so I was like, wow, he really said that. That was sort of my reaction, and the nurse was like, we should just get this guy out of here, just kick him out, sort of thing, don't even bother. But so it was really this irony because I was actually the only African American doctor in the whole team of doctors in the entire hospital. And he just happened to be assigned to me.
His lucky day.
Yeah, exactly. So so that scene, so he went in there, and then so he was an older guy, he had pneumonia, at least that's what we thought initially. Sort of standard sort of person that gets admitted to the hospital, an older guy. But then we met his family, and so his daughter and his grandson. And the daughter had a shirt with the Confederate flag, one of those huge Confederate flags, and then the grandson had a Confederate flag tattooed on his arm, and I'm thinking, ooh, this is probably not going to work out. And so, that was my first feeling, right? As you can imagine. So Yeah. So what he actually did, so I mentioned that the doctor that was a woman, you know, the one above me. I think he had a negative opinion of women as well, because there was a medical student, he was a secondary student, he was a white man, and so he was looking at that. The patient looked at him as if he was the one in charge, which is you know, crazy if you think about it. If you know how medical students work.
Sure.
And so that's how it happened. And so. Yeah, so that was another example, just like that first year where you have to deal with, you have this sort of, you're struggling with all the difficulties of being a doctor, being a medical student, and then this other layer is added onto you. It's this constant reminder. It's this constant reminder that you're
this other layer.
That you're like
and
different.
the other layer is always there, but it can function in different ways on almost every occasion.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that you're different.
Something, though, that's quite striking about your book is that you have the honesty to make clear that when you saw the Confederate shirt and tattoo, you formed suppositions about these people.
Sure.
Right.
And I think that's an example of how everyone does. I think I talk about candidly that I thought, well, this is a person who lives in a trailer park, didn't go to school.
We could use the word redneck. I mean, that's clearly what you thought.
Trailer park trash, the term that's used. Yeah, so I've heard these terms before, and these are things that I thought about, right? So I mean, so we all had these assumptions, and so so I had a very negative opinion of him, just as he did of me, and so the chapter really talks about how I was able to work through this and how we were able to work through this. And have very sort of improbable kind of ending based on how things started. So it's really kind of a story about you know how these horrible first impressions can sometimes be overcome. And so that was really the story in a nutshell.
You know, the trouble is you can't screen people for attitude before they come into the emergency room, right? That actually people in the emergency room are even more likely perhaps to have all kinds of attitudes than people with excellent health plans, perhaps, right? So there you are, and you have to deal with it, and you can't pick and choose what patients you're going to deal with. But I think it's very striking in this one that at a certain point the daughter learns that you're going to have your first child.
No, I think she learned. No, she learned that I was getting married. That's what it was.
Oh, maybe she learned you were getting married.
Yeah.
So she says to you at some point, "You'll be a really good dad."
Right.
Which seems to be just such a totally amazing turn for the story to have taken.
Yeah. So some of the things that happen. So there, it's one of the things where again, how do you deal with this person who has this sort of negative opinion of you? Do you try and push him off? Do you go up to the higher people? And so I was worried about that. If I go up to the higher level of people and try and make a trade and change, it's going to cause all these problems. People are going to complain about it. Let me just deal with it myself. So that's sort of like this way. I'm not saying this is the best way to deal with it, but this is sort of how I survived and sort of made it through the process. And so there are a couple of examples where there was a day when he needed some kind of blood drawn, and all the people had tried, and so I was able to come in and get the blood. And so they were like, wow. And so it was sort of this like, maybe this guy is a real doctor and he kind of can do some stuff. And so it's the same sort of thing. It's this constant sort of idea you have to deal with. And so I think that was for the first turning point. And then actually, one day I talked to him. There was a baseball game on, right? It was something small like that. There was a baseball game on. We were talking baseball before. And I said, do you like baseball? And then he sort of kind of opened up a little bit. And then we were able to talk about baseball. And so it was like this little small kind of connection. And then from there, I learned about his life a little bit, that this was a real person, even though he had this, he's just had all this sort of bad stuff. He also was a real person, and he was married, and he took care of his wife, and he had a job, and he had a family. And so eventually you sort of make a little bit of a connection in these different ways. And so that's sort of how that story, kind of unfolded. But it's, that's sort of the...
I mean, it's very interesting, and it happens many times in the book. One of the things you make clear is that even people who are the objects of prejudice can have their own prejudices in return. You say prejudice breeds prejudice. And so these stories of how a doctor, it's not that you can ever ask for a world free from prejudice. You've got to work in the world that's there, but you seem to hint that there's a way of practicing medicine where you're able to get beyond the prejudices that things start with.
It doesn't always work, but that's sort of like the aspiration that I tried, and examples that I'm trying to offer.
I'm going to ask you about two other examples. There's a part of the book, because of course somebody could say from that, a good way to avoid this would be, let's have black patients only see black doctors, right? And white patients could only see white doctors, because then no one will be able to say these objectionable things. You have an extraordinarily interesting chapter about that, in which you look at the upsides and downsides of it, many, many ways, but in which all of a sudden you're assigned a black patient who is a graduate student, so that's to say it's a very different kind of socioeconomic relation, only to find that this person does not want to have a black male doctor, right? Because,
yeah, so there are actually a couple instances in the book that I talk about that. So that one I'll kind of just describe. So yeah, that's where this is a biracial woman, and so her background is that her dad was black, mom was white, had a very contentious sort of family relationship, where the dad was sort of like the one who had not been so kind to her. I'll just put it, that's the best way to put it. And so she had really developed a fear of African American men over the course of her sort of life. And she'd grown up with the mom and sort of gone to predominantly white schools, and sort of really kind of separated herself off from the African American community. And so when she walked in, again, it's just the idea I was the only black person in this clinic, and it just so happened that she was, that she comes up and she's assigned, and I see her. And at first she was like, this isn't going to work. Sort of thing, and then I was thinking, well, if you feel that way, then you're probably right. It's not going to work. That was sort of my initial thought. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking to myself. But then, we came back the next week, and she did come back. And I was surprised actually, but she said a friend told her you really got to come back and try this out. And then we just talked. We talked, and then it was really amazing, kind of what happened, the transformation she underwent. She was really able to. We just talked about everything, every aspect of race you could imagine, every dimension of it, class, every dimension you could imagine, we talked about. And by the end of that time, she really she was able to sort of see herself and see how this sort of hatred of African American people was really affecting her own identity and how she saw herself. She was able to sort of make that connection, and she ended up dating an African American man and getting married to an African man. So I saw her years later, and it was an amazing sort of transformation that she had made from the person, that first saw.
Well, so instead of treating, you get the idea, don't you? Instead of treating people's symptoms, actually there's a teaching dimension of your practice of medicine, which I think is a really interesting thing. And one of the things that I don't remember you're talking about in the book is, of all the fields of medicine you could have gone into, you were impressed by a cardiologist when you were at UMBC, but you didn't go into cardiology, right? The head of surgery Danny Jacobs was appointed when you were still in medical school, I think, or soon thereafter. But you didn't go into surgery. You went into psychiatry. So what I want to ask you is about how you understand your choice of field in relation to all the issues that we've talked about.
I think I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, but I mean, in truth, let's open the secret.
No.
What people become is part of the mystery of who they are.
No, absolutely, yes. Right. Yeah, so I think there are a couple layers to that. So psychiatry often is stigmatized within medicine as sort of like, in its own way, but then even within an African American community, there's a lot of stigma towards, many ways. It's a generalization, but there often can be. And so when I told my family that I was going to psychiatry, they were like, what happened to you? You were going to medical school.
You seem like such a nice boy.
Yeah, you're going to be, you're going to be a cardiologist. You're going to be a cardiologist.
You were going to make your mother proud.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be like a cardiologist, or the things I was thinking about actually were cardiology and orthopedic surgery, because I played sports and had a lot of sports injuries. Those are the two things that really appealed to me coming to medical school. And I actually did rotations through those. I actually liked those fields. I started my training actually still thinking I was going to be a cardiologist. I started in general medicine thinking I was going to be like Dr. Crawford over there and become a cardiologist. And so that was sort of how I started things. But then during the course of that year, I realized how much what I liked most about the interaction was just the exchange of talking to people, figuring people out, understanding them, trying to help them in that way. And it seemed like I had a capacity for people to, it's something I'd never imagined. People really were able to open up to me and sort of and felt comfortable in that exchange, and I sort of had an aptitude for it. And it really kind of surprised me. So it was something that kind of evolved. It wasn't something I ever imagined when I started medical school that I'd be a psychiatrist. But when you think about the stories and the connections, psychiatry is sort of the field that you think about. So I think it's only fitting that it all worked out that way.
For me, the most powerful moment in the book is one that involves you're working in the ER. A person comes in with a severe schizophrenic break, I suppose you'd call it, right? And so what are you going to do with this person? I mean, I remember when the new ER was built at Duke, I go visit places. So I went to see what does it look like. And you know what? Every ER, I know that every ER has a psychiatric part, and then within its psychiatric part it has like an even more, right? I mean, because there are situations where people are really hard to handle. And so you've got this person who is really crazy, right? And there's a racial dimension to his craziness. I mean, based on the things he said, I think you could imagine that. Sure. So this is a black man. And so what are you going to do? So you're going to take him into this room. So you have to physically restrain him. And then you have to take the tranquilizers, right? And so you have this scene. I mean, it's just like looks like the ultimate scene of racial abuse, right? A person being restrained, somebody approaching them with something that looks a little like a weapon. And then, but that isn't what happens. But also you make clear that you know in this book that if this person can't be tranquilized some way, that is the resort. And you also make clear that you understand that the person holding the needle is in physical danger as a result of the person who's crazy in the room. I mean, so that's to say, it's very complicated recognition of the dimensions of the situation. And then there's this scene where you say, give me a minute. And you go up and talk to the person,
Yeah. So because again, it's the way the scene is set up. You had like two police officers. In this case, two white police officers. There was an African American man, and he had this, people in his neighborhood had been it's like the whole idea of gentrification and people coming in and moving people out. And so he took this into a way in which it became this kind of psychotic kind of delusion where it was just sort of out of touch with reality, and he became very aggressive and agitated, and that's why he came into the hospital. And so he was going to come in there, and I'd seen it happen many times before. Someone comes in the hospital like that, they get strapped down, and someone just jabs a needle in there. And so that's really inhumane kind of way. And so I wanted to say, well, I always try and let me just talk to him and see if we can get anywhere with this before we go there. And so that was my approach in this case. And so first he was like, "You're Michael Jordan," and so that was sort of his thought. I've heard that a million times.
Damon, Damon, you do have certain unfair advantages.
Yeah, so in this case, I think that worked in my advantage, right? But then I assured him that I wasn't, and he was kind of disappointed.
But it had a psychological impact.
but nonetheless, though, I think he was able to. We talked a little bit, and I said, I think I kind of know why you're acting like that. I think you're probably a little scared about all this, and there's all these people around you, and it's kind of. He's like, you know what, man, and we talked about it. He's like, you're right. I'm just tired. Let me just get some rest and I'll feel better. And so we were able to kind of avoid this whole horrible situation that could have happened just by, a 5-minute exchange. And I'd seen it go so many times go the other way. And so I wanted to try and, do that. So I feel like, in some way it was trying to keep some of his dignity, and so I think that was really important for me in that situation.
And in the field you're in, no doubt, not every situation can be brought to that kind of happy ending.
No, absolutely
right?
not. And it's still not a happy ending.
But at the same time, there's just something so powerful about the idea that you as a doctor are it's not a medical cure, it's like an extension of one's humanity to someone else's humanity, and then the situation changes a little, and then the medical part gets a little bit better.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's several things in that book. I know that I wanted to just kind of piggyback on one thing you were saying about the bias. Like we talked about when I saw that family who was really biased towards me, the Confederate flags and all that sorts of thing. But then right around that same time, shortly after that, I saw how doctors is going to have a bias towards the patients and how that could play out. And so this is a case where this is right around this, about a month later. It was an African American man. He was about in his 50s, and he came to the hospital. He had chest pain. The usual thing is you want to make sure they didn't have a heart attack, and he didn't. And then so I was on the team, and the rest of the team were white. And in this case, we talked. Once we knew he didn't have a heart attack, we went and talked to him, like, what are we going to do now? How are we going to get you, what kind of plan are we going to come up with to sort of get you home and reduce your risk of having problems in the future? And so what we did in this case is, it involved like blood pressure medicines and stopping smoking, patches for smoking, those sorts of things. So he was on board with everything, but then we mentioned about taking a blood pressure medicine. He kind of was like, I'd like to try and hold off on that first. Can I try and lose weight? I can follow a diet. I can do better. And they were at first they were a little surprised. They're like, well, what do you know about eating better? I mean, that's kind of what they said. And it was like, wow, and so I kind of was feeling a little uncomfortable right there because I kind of sensed that this wasn't going well. And because we were in a public hospital, low-income patients, and I could already see that maybe there was something wasn't going well here. But then they went back and forth, and they finally agreed to disagree. And I think during this exchange, he really showed a lot of knowledge. He knew quite a bit about nutrition and things that you're supposed to eat and not eat. He showed a lot of knowledge. And he said, well, I just need to have the motivation to do it. And this having this chest pain is really going to tell me this is my wake-up call. I'm going to do better now. And they said, okay, sure, good luck. And then as he walked out the room, it was they started talking amongst themselves about, like, well, what do you think's wrong with this guy? What do you think's going on? And so I'm thinking medical stuff because the guy came with chest pain. Does he have like an ulcer? All kinds of medical issues that I'm thinking about. And then they start throwing out psychiatric diagnoses. You're like, oh, do you think maybe he's obsessive compulsive, or do you think he has a? And they started saying all these psychiatric terms. This is before I was in psychiatry, and they're just like, wow, how did you go from that to that? And it was shocking to me. And then what they ended up doing was they ended up like labeling. They ended up putting that label in his chart that he had a psychiatric illness. So this guy comes in to the hospital with chest pain, and it wasn't like they were talking about, for the psychiatrist, it wasn't like they were talking about panic attacks, which often goes together with chest pain. This is something completely different. They were saying he had this sort of characterological psychiatric illness because he had such knowledge about following this particular diet. And it was like he just knew too much for the context that he was in, and he had this, thus there must be something wrong with him.
A more sophisticated version of your first-year medical professor.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so it was really just really troubling, and so it was another example of how these prejudices can kind of come in and impact care, because having a label like that really can impact you. It's not like it's just a benign sort of academic exercise, because when you come back to the medical center the next time someone sees that label, then they make, because we all make judgments about people when we see these things, so they make a judgment, and that can really impact them. So these are just sort of the things that I saw along the way.
Well, I could carry this on for a long way, but I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. So you trace a landscape in which race is a dimension of every single scene you write about, right? I think a person reading your book who didn't already know this would understand that humans are capable of getting beyond prejudice, but that prejudice is part of the human equipment. And so it's not amazing to run into it. And you show various ways that you have found in the world of medicine to acknowledge it, to help people past it, things of that sort. But a question comes up over and over again, at least 5 or 6 times in this book, which is, does a black doctor have a special obligations? And the interesting thing to me is you don't answer it, but it's as if the asking of the question is the answer somehow.
Yeah, I grapple with that question in many ways. I mean, so, because I'm honest about this in the book. There are examples where I'm sort of struggling, and I'm catching myself being biased against other black people, or black people, patients being biased against me. And so I struggle with these, because you grow up and you have this world of segregation and inequality, and it's often, it's a sad truth that you often will internalize some of these negative things that are told about you. And so I struggle with that. And so I'm really honest about how that affected me and affected some of the patients that I saw, and how I had to sort of, the struggle that comes with that. But over the time, I saw that my encounters with African American patients, sort of the positive sort of far outweighed those sort of negative experiences that I had as I got further along in it. And so I became more and more convinced that I did have a role to play. But at the same time, it's a challenge, because what I would find is that, like when I became a psychiatrist, there's always this theme of being the only person. So I was the only psychiatrist, and I got all these requests to see every sort of African American patient.
You call it racial profiling.
Yeah, and so there was like this, and it's like, well, I'm one person. How am I going to manage? Durham's 40% black, the clinic's 50% black. I'm one person, and so there became a case where people said, Damon, I need you to see this person. I need you to see this person. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And it sort of felt like there was like, what is my role? Can I really do this? And so it was sort of it's a blessing in some ways to be able to be a help, but it's also a kind of a burden in this other way. And you sort of struggle with both of those things throughout. And so that's sort of the tension that goes throughout the book.
So here's my last question. What made you write a book? I mean, you went to medical school, you became a doctor, you've engaged in medical practice, episode after episode after episode, but writing a book is a different kind of thing. So what was that about?
Well, that's a great question. So there's a sort of practical side to it. So I really always enjoyed reading books by doctors describing their lives in medicine.
Gifted hands.
Well, so Gifted Hands, yeah. I mean, but that's more like autobiography, more so than I like more the ones with stories of like doctors and their sort of stories, interactions with patients, those kind of clinical narrative sort of stories. Okay. And so when those kind of books, there were very few of them, almost really none, that sort of talked about what it was like to be a black doctor in that experience, or what it was like to sort of see. Most of the doctors really avoided race, even when they were talking about their patients. And and whether that was an intentional decision, maybe they felt race was just too dicey to go into it. I don't want to go there. I don't want to open up that can of worms. It was almost like I wasn't getting the experience that I was experiencing. So I almost wanted to write the book that I would have wanted to read when I was, a medical student or a young doctor. So that was a big part of it, sort of trying to put something that I felt like wasn't there, sort of giving voice to that. So giving voice to, because what I found as I've gone to speak with people is how so many young doctors and medical students, they're saying, man, you've written my story. I wish that, I would have written this story, or thanks for writing this story. I just hear that over and over again. I get emails from so many people. So it's almost like giving voice to people who haven't had a voice. And really, it's especially the case with the patients. I mean, so many of the African American patients are much, much worse off. And sort of giving voice to, you just hear these statistics, but it's like giving voice to their experience in their lives and putting it into context. I think it was a really important thing to do.
So you might say this is an English teacher kind of thought, but really, you ask yourself over and over again the question, is there a special obligation that a black doctor has? And it can't be to reform the healthcare system for the whole world, right? Or do away with racism in all its manifestations. Right. It can't be. Your book makes clear that that's beyond the power of any individual. But the writing of the book seems to me to have a part of this. That's to say, you're going to tell this story. You're going to lay out the this dimension of human interactions and human inequalities and the efforts to live in the face of them. And just I would say I am one grateful reader in a nation that apparently has lots and lots of them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Damon's going to be around, and I think you'll be upstairs because you have books up there. But
Oh, I do?
if there's a few
I
questions,
didn't know that.
please.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any close relationships with people that have gone to historically black medical schools, and have you had any dialogue with them?
I'm
about,
sure so.
How their experiences were
Sure.
compared with yours going to a predominantly white?
So historically black, like colleges or medical schools? Okay,
Like
'cause
Morehouse, Meharry.
I was going to say my room. He asked about experience with historically black, knowing doctors who've gone to historically black colleges or medical schools. So in college, my roommate in medical school actually had gone to Morehouse for college, so he certainly had that kind of perspective. But that's from college to medical school. As far as historically black medical schools, there are there are only a couple. So there's Howard, there's Meharry, and there's Morehouse. I mean, those are really the main three. And Charles Drew in LA. That's right. That's right. So so you gotta keep on track here. Yeah. So they said those are the main ones. But as far as, I've worked with folks many people from Howard and Morehouse. Has their experience been different? Yes and no. In some ways, they're more insulated, but then when they get out into the clinical wards, for instance, at Morehouse, my wife trained at Emory, and so they would often interact with the students at Morehouse and Emory, would interact, and they would often have some of the same sorts of experiences. So doctors I know who worked gone to Morehouse for medical school, for instance, have had some of those same sorts of experiences when they got into the clinical world, because you get out into the clinical world and you're interacting with other doctors and patients that are white, and so you still have to deal with some of these same problems. Yeah. So some of it just sort of, is a nature of the beast of being an African American doctor in this kind of world. That's been my perspective, at least, anyway.
Please.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Harrison. I'm a medical student as well as studying theology here in Divinity School. And something we talk about a lot, I'm passionate about, is how the church can be engaged in issues of race in medicine. And so I'm curious in what resources, or do you think that the church, which I know is really prominent within black communities, is one of the last safe black spaces? How do you see it as a force or a lack thereof in the ability to speak in this dialogue and to change the system of racism which permeates what we do?
Wow, that's a great question. So he's asking about the role of the church, the African American church, in these sort of dialogues. That's a great question. I mean, I can tell you that, particularly in mental health field, you will see patients who sort of, I think my colleague next to you has done some work in this, Dr. Kinghorn, has done some work in this field. But yeah, I've certainly seen cases where there's been some interface where people in the church are able to sort of get people, there's a trust there, so they can get people into the healthcare system in a way that they might not otherwise. So I've certainly seen that play out in many situations. But as far as dealing with the larger problem, it's just such a hard, as far as the racism part, that's a huge issue. But I think helping the trust barrier, there's a role to play for sure there. I've certainly seen that play out. Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
So you talked a little bit about racial disparities in health and physician bias against minorities. I was just wondering what you thought of race-based medicine. So therapies like Bill or
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the things so she's asking about race-based therapies, Biddle being the antihypertensive treatment. So I think that's a really great question, actually. So there's often a reflexive tendency when you're African American and you talk about race-based treatment. There's often going to be a reflexive sort of aversion to that, because you're thinking about the history of how these sorts of genetic things have been used to the detriment of African American people and discriminating. So there's always that sort of reflexive nature. But I don't think we should run away from that. My personal belief is that as far as the issues of the health disparities, I think there's probably a small component there are some genetic components in certain diseases. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think we should run from that. But I would also say that the bigger genetics is not destiny. So like, for instance, I probably have a genetic predisposition of high blood pressure based on how I got it in my family at the young age I got it. But I've been able to modify my lifestyle and exert complete control over it. So I don't take medications, I don't have and I have a completely normal blood pressure. So even if there is a genetic predisposition, we shouldn't run from that knowledge, but that shouldn't be our destiny. It's just sort of, this is it, and we just sort of accept that. We can sort of be empowered, to take action, where we can. So that's sort of the message I want to convey. But yeah, we shouldn't run from it, though.
I've observed at times that black colleagues in medical faculty have the burden of getting a lot of requests to be on committees, to represent, and so on. So I'm curious what your thoughts about being on faculty and underrepresented faculty members in a time when people are very sensitized to trying to make some progress despite all the history.
Yeah, it goes back to that blessing and burden kind of thing, right? And so I know there was an article in the Chronicle a couple years ago where people had talked about that, and some African-American faculty talked about feeling like they were having to do all these committees, and that was affecting their progress in terms of, I remember reading some article to that effect. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you feel like you're okay with it, and sometimes you kind of just want to be like everyone else, and so it's almost like this sort of constant kind of tension and push and pull. You know, it's not like I can say, it just sort of depends on when you kind of get me in as far as how I feel about it, because it's like a constant push and pull. Sometimes I feel like it's okay and I embrace it, and sometimes I wish that it weren't that way, but I understand the broader reality. I don't know if there's an easy way to solve that problem. I mean, we have a serious underrepresentation, right, among African Americans in medicine and in faculty. I mean, it's a reality, and so until that changes, you're going to continue to sort of experience some of these realities. Yeah, it's a great question, though.
Sir, and this will be the last.
Careful.
Uh-oh.
Do we have a black or a white president?
Okay. Do we have a black or white president? Well, so some people are going to say race is socially constructed, right? So if you take that route, I mean, wow, that's a tough question. So he self-identifies as African American, so I'm gonna leave that to him. Not sure if I think I'll leave it there. Again, I should have asked you what you thought. I should have done the psychiatry thing, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay, after you can treat him afterward.
Yeah.
Universities have the incredible privilege of drawing talented people from everywhere, right? And when people get there, often they feel like everybody's smarter than them, everybody's more at home than them. It's really quite a remarkably common phenomenon for people to have that experience. And in your case, it was complicated or aggravated in a variety of ways. But I think the other thing that I just feel when I listen to you is, it's not that life was made free of challenges for you. It's just that there was something you wanted to do, and so you just found your way to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it in face of all those challenges. As a result of which you developed some wisdom about those challenges, which is what you have to offer us in your book. So just on behalf of Duke University, I'm just delighted to have you as an alum and to have you as a colleague at this place. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Produced by Duke University.